The village was like a place frozen in time, nestled in a valley where the wind carried secrets and the nights felt impossibly long. At the edge of the village, Elmswood Manor loomed atop a hill, its dark silhouette etched against the moonlit sky. Legends whispered about the manor, claiming it was cursed. Late at night, faint lights flickered in its windows, and the haunting strains of music could sometimes be heard. Most villagers avoided even speaking of the place, but for Amelia, the manor held an inexplicable pull. It called to her in a way she couldn't explain, like an unfinished thought lingering in the back of her mind. Amelia had come to the village seeking solace. A writer by trade, she was drowning in grief after a heartbreak that had robbed her of inspiration. Renting a quiet stone cottage on the outskirts, she spent her days sketching half-formed ideas in her notebook and staring at the distant manor through her window. It became a habit she couldn't shake, her curiosity growing stronger with each passing day. One rainy evening, a crimson envelope appeared on her doorstep. The rain had soaked the stone steps, but the envelope was pristine, its thick paper unyielding to the dampness. Inside, written in elegant script, was an invitation. "You are cordially invited to the midnight masquerade at Elmswood Manor. Tonight, as the clock strikes 12. The air seemed to still as she read the words. She scanned the darkened street, but no one was there. For a long moment, she debated whether to go, but curiosity, ever her greatest flaw, won out. Midnight crept closer as Amelia prepared herself. She slipped into a black gown that hung in her wardrobe like a relic of a distant life, its hem brushing her ankles as she moved. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirror, a face she barely recognized, framed by loose waves of dark hair. She fastened a simple silver mask over her eyes, the soft fabric cool against her skin. The path to the manor was steep and winding, flanked by ancient trees that seemed to lean inward, their gnarled branches forming a canopy overhead. The moonlight struggled to pierce through, casting the world in shadow. As she approached the iron gates, they groaned open, the sound echoing into the still night. The manor itself was a hauntingly beautiful sight. Its towering windows glowed faintly, and ivy crept up its stone walls like frozen veins. The doors swung open at her touch, revealing a grand foyer that smelled of aged wood and candle wax. The ballroom was alive with light and movement. Hundreds of candles lined the walls, their flickering flames reflected in the polished marble floor. Guests in elaborate costumes and ornate masks glided across the floor in perfect synchrony, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a violin. Yet, despite the beauty, something felt off. The air was too still, the faces behind the masks too perfect. The dancers moved like clockwork, their steps precise and unchanging. Amelia watched, spellbound, until her gaze settled on a single figure, a man standing apart from the crowd. He wore a silver mask that gleamed in the candlelight, and a tailored suit that seemed to belong to another era. There was a stillness about him, as if he were waiting for something, or someone. Their eyes met across the room, and the noise around her seemed to fade. Drawn to him, Amelia took a step forward, and he offered her his hand. Their dance began slowly, a tentative waltz that soon felt as natural as breathing. His presence was magnetic, his movements graceful, yet deliberate. As they twirled beneath the high ceiling, Amelia felt as though she had stepped out of time, caught in a dream she didn't want to wake from. The night unfolded in a haze of surreal beauty, but cracks began to appear in the illusion. The dancers around her cast no shadows, their movements repetitive, like actors performing the same scene over and over. Reflections in the grand mirrors showed the room, but not the people within it. Her dance partner led her through a hidden door behind a velvet curtain, revealing a vast library that stretched into darkness. The shelves were lined with ancient books, their spines cracked and faded. At the center of the room sat a desk with a single manuscript, its pages filled with ink that seemed to glisten in the dim light. Amelia's fingers brushed the edges of the pages, and an overwhelming sense of familiarity washed over her. The story was a reflection of her own, a tale of love, loss, and longing, unfinished and unresolved. The weight of it pressed on her chest, but she couldn't turn away. She stayed in the library for what felt like hours, drawn deeper into the words as she pieced together the story. The man spoke of the midnight masquerade, a gathering of lost souls bound to the manor, each trapped by the weight of an incomplete tale. As she read, she realized that her presence wasn't a coincidence. She had been chosen, not just to witness their stories, but to finish one. Amelia returned to the manor night after night, pouring herself into the manuscript. The ballroom grew quieter with each visit, the once vivid figures of the masquerade fading into whispers. The man lingered, watching her work, his form becoming more solid, more real, with every word she wrote. The final chapter came to her in a rush of inspiration. She penned the last lines with trembling hands, her heart aching with the knowledge that this act would end everything she had come to know in the manor. As the ink dried, the room filled with light. The figures of the masquerade smiled faintly as they dissolved, their laughter echoing like wind through the trees. The man stood before her, his mask gone, his face etched with gratitude and sorrow. He reached out, his hand warm against her cheek, before fading into nothingness. The manuscript remained on the desk, its weight heavier than ever. Amelia left Elmswood Manor at dawn, the manuscript clutched tightly in her arms. The sun broke over the hills, painting the sky in soft hues of gold. She walked the path back to her cottage in silence, her heart heavy with loss, but lighter with purpose. The story she carried was not just his, but hers, a tale of love, loss, and redemption. As she reached her cottage, the village began to stir, the morning air filled with the sounds of life. She sat by her window, the manor now just a shadow on the hill. Closing her eyes, she allowed herself to drift into sleep, dreaming of the dance that had changed everything. Do like and subscribe this channel if you love your puppy.